So good afternoon and welcome to the November 4th inaugural meeting. It's nice to see everybody today. I have the honor and privilege of temporarily chairing the start of today's meeting and would like to acknowledge that the TNRD connects with many First Nation communities across our vast regional district. And today we are located on the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc and respect the territory and the land on which we gather today. So my joke was, since I don't get the opportunity to chair very often, that I wanted to make some quick changes prior to the election. But I was, of course, kidding, and they wouldn't let me here locally. So I would like to begin the meeting by calling upon Ms. Campbell to start the election by providing an overview of the process we will be following today and to both elect the chair and the vice chair. So Ms. Campbell, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand. Those on Zoom, can you hear me? Am I supposed to have this feedback?
I hear you.
You can? Great. Let me just see if we can do something about this feedback, Dave.
Lost the video. I did.
Testing?
Oh, there we go.
I'm just.
I can't hear anything.
I think we've lost the audio.
Can you guys hear me okay now? Yep, great.
Yes.
Okay, let's get started. So as set out in the Local Government Act and the Board Procedure Bylaw, we are now going to carry out the election of chair for the TNRD Board of Directors. The successful candidate will serve in the position until November 2022 inaugural meeting. I'll now go over the nomination process. Nominations will be called 3 times. As candidates are nominated, they will be asked if they consent to the nomination. Nominations will then be closed. If there is only one consenting candidate, the candidate will be acclaimed as the chair. If there are 2 or more consenting candidates, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish before the ballots are distributed. I will now call for nominations for the position of chair. First call for nominations for the position of chair. Dr. Schaefer?
I'd like to nominate Ken Gillis for chair.
Dr. Gillis, do you accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination.
Thank you. Second call for nominations for the office of chair. Director Sinclair?
I'd like to nominate Director Duty for chair.
Director Duty, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. Third and final call for nominations for the office of chair. Seeing none, I declare the nominations closed for the office of chair.
Sorry, Director Brown. I know I don't have a legal conflict, but I would like to declare any perception of a perceived conflict.
Thank you, Director Brown. So each candidate in order of nomination will now have 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish. I'll turn it over to you, Director Gillis.
Thanks, Ms. Campbell. I'll do a little bit of background and then where I'd like to see the board go and the reasons why I think I'm qualified to take the board in that direction. Excuse me. In my first term as chair, I worked with the staff to overcome challenges which led eventually to the departure of our CAO. Now we are in the latter stage of a deeply penetrating forensic investigation, and I very much want to see that through to its completion. I have intimate familiarity with what has evolved so far, and I consider that I am by far the best positioned to carry it to its conclusion. I played a leading role on the committee choosing Mr. Gill's successor, and you have clearly voiced your approval of the result. Not that I was responsible for that result, but I did play, as I said, a leading role with that committee. It was a committee decision. I've worked with Mr. Hildebrand often as a sounding board in replacing retirees and bringing on new staff. And that's from both within our organization and from outside. We're building a team of young, eager, qualified people who are carrying the TNRD's business out with proficiency and professionalism. And I'm very excited about this new group of people that we're putting together. Through the past summer, the summer from hell, I conferred with staff, I encouraged them, and did countless interviews with all media. The media have thanked me for being as accessible as I was, but more important is the fact that I always strived to make you, the board, proud of, or at the very least, not embarrassed by your spokesman. There remains an enormous amount of work to be done, particularly with ongoing discussions with BC Wildfire and others, if we are to avoid repeating the tragic destruction of 2021. This is especially true if we hope to protect our smaller communities and our rural areas. And I wish to be the voice of the TNRD in those discussions this winter and through the spring. And I believe the experience I gained this year makes me well qualified to handle that duty on your behalf. In terms of commitment, surely no one would question how seriously I take the responsibility of the chair's position. I have never missed a meeting in 3 years, and I continue to be passionate about the role. We at the TNRD are turning a corner. I'm proud to have been at the wheel as we negotiated the curve. I hope you have the confidence in me to permit me to finish the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gillis. Director Duty, we'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Well, first, let me preface my little speech by thanking our chair for having navigated the TNRD ship through some very turbulent waters over the last 3 years. We have experienced unprecedented challenges that have seriously tested the mettle of each and every member on this board, some more so than others, but not one of us has been spared. To lead a group through this cataclysm is by no means an easy task, and unfortunately doesn't always bring absolute resolution. One of the biggest challenges we face moving forward will be to regain the public trust. That said, I don't believe that can be done by presenting the status quo. We have to be seen as truly embracing change, and that change includes changing the captain in the wheelhouse. While our chair has worked hard through these stormy times, we need to be seen as righting the ship. I believe I can help navigate us to calmer seas, and I ask for your thoughtful consideration and would gratefully like the opportunity to act as your chair over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Duty. So staff, our Deputy Corporate Officer, will now distribute the ballots. For those in person, please write the name of the nominee you wish to elect to the position of chair. For those participating electronically, you will be receiving an email. Please follow the directions in the email to cast your vote. We're just going to ask for some patience as it will take us a little bit longer to do the ballot counting with the electronic voting. So we'll return with the results shortly.
All right, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me online? So the results are in,
I can hear you.
and the results of your voting is that Director Gillis is your chair going forward. So congratulations.
We
Congratulations,
lost
Chair
the sound, I
Gillis.
think.
Did you want me to proceed with conducting?
What's
our-
happening, Ms. Campbell? Are you moving to vice chair, or am I allowed to say a few words?
You can, no, you can say a few words.
Okay,
absolutely.
well, first of all, of course, what I'm going to say is thank you very much for the vote of confidence, and I appreciate it, and I take it, as I said earlier in my comments, very, very seriously. I will continue to take it seriously. And there are undoubtedly people who may have questions who wonder if my chairmanship could not be improved. I'm always open to criticism. I'm always open to suggestions, and I will welcome them from you. But in the meantime, as I say, I'll do my best to first make you proud, or at the very least, not embarrass you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. We will now carry out the election of the vice chair for the TNRD Board of Directors. Oh, sorry. We were going to do it at the end, but sure, we can do a motion to destroy the ballots now for these, for the chair. Yep. Now? Sure. Someone want to move it? Okay.
Everybody's ahead of us.
We're all in favor of it? Thank you.
Now,
Okay, on to the elect, Director Elliott.
I was going to nominate.
Oh, I haven't,
You haven't started
yeah,
yet.
I gotta get there, yeah. Well, you know the rules now. Nominations will be called 3 times. As candidates are nominated, they will be asked if they consent to the nomination. Nominations will then be closed. If there's only one consenting candidate, that candidate will be acclaimed as the vice chair. If there are 2 or more candidates, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish. I will now call for nominations for the position of vice chair. First call for nominations for the office of vice chair. Director Elliott.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to nominate Director Roden.
Director Roden, do you consent to the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Second call for nominations for the office of vice chair. Is there anyone on Zoom that I'm not seeing? Just checking, making sure. No. Okay. Third and final call for nominations for the office of vice chair. Okay, I declare the nominations closed for the office of vice chair. Director Roden is acclaimed to the office of vice chair. Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much. I had my speech all prepared, and so that's gone in the great waste basket. Thank you so much, Director Elliott, for the nomination. I'd like to thank Chair Gillis and Director Duty for throwing their hats into the ring for chair. And I'd like to thank Director Kershaw for his many years of service to the TNRD, the last 3 as vice chair. I got to know Director Kershaw before I was on the TNRD board, and it's been a pleasure working with him over the last 3 years and working with all of you. And I very much look forward to that, working with Chair Gillis to support the chair, to support staff, and to support this board as the TNRD moves forward over the next year. Thank you.
Well, I guess that brings us to chair's announcements. And there are several. The library is pleased to announce its One Book, One Community 2021 reading selection, 5 Little Indians by award-winning Indigenous author Michelle Good. 5 Little Indians follows the lives of Indigenous youth as they navigate life in the 1960s. In 1960s. School. This region-wide initiative is a partnership between the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library, Thompson Rivers University, the Thompson Regional District Library. It supports literacy, promotes Canadian authors and their stories, and provokes discussion and builds understanding. Further details are found in your blue folder. The video we'll play now introduces us to Michelle Good and shows highlights of her award-winning novel, Five Little Indians.
Five Little Indians is the story of 5 residential school survivors that focuses not so much on their experiences in the residential school, but on the traumas that they carry with them throughout their life after they leave the school. I looked at the kinds of harms that survivors experienced as a result of their treatment at residential school, and I started the characters not as people, but as harms. And then I asked myself, what kind of person would this person grow into? We often hear that chorus of why can't they just get over it? That trauma doesn't simply disappear once you've left the residential school. The trauma continues to echo through their lives, both as individuals and collectively in our communities. Kenny walked along the meandering creek, enjoying the sound of it when it narrowed and quickened, the peace of it when it widened and slowed, deeper and quieter, the rusty-colored stones casting a sparkling copper tone on the crystalline water. There was a bitter sweetness in seeing his old friend. He was happy to share their tricky survival memories. It was the other ones, the ones that slipped in through the silences, that he was relieved to lose in his usual solitude.
Well, if that was meant to be a teaser, it certainly worked. I think that would trigger a desire to read the rest of the tale. Next on our chair's announcement is from an economic development perspective. On Monday, November the 8th, the project manager of Nordic City will meet with the TNRD Motion Picture Studio Steering Committee in Kamloops to explore the preliminary outcomes of its research into the business case of having a purpose-built film studio in the region. And yes, Director Elliott.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Chair, but I'm getting an echo and I didn't hear one word you said. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you because it was jumbled.
I, for one, am happy to see this film studio suggestion, if not moving forward, at least getting some very serious consideration. For education, the Film Commission has worked on with the North Island College and North Island Film Commissions to create 3 tuition-free film training courses for TNRD residents. The courses include online and in-person education and hands-on workshops. In our film industry, the CBC TV miniseries Bones of Crow has wrapped. The production wound up filming for 19 days, and altogether the production worked in the region for more than 2 months. The feature film The Friendship Game has wrapped and filmed for 20 days and worked in the region for about 1 month. The TV series Motherland Fort Salem is scheduled to film around Cache Creek area at the end of November for 1 to 2 days. In 2021, early statistics reflect that 11 projects filmed in our region with over 200 shooting days. The result is more than 6 million in direct spend with an economic impact of about 16 million. That's more than 2020 and triple 2019's statistics. So clearly the film commission is doing very, very well and continuing to do well in spite of COVID. The film commission will present a full report to the board in early January. In upcoming meetings and events, on the 17th, the Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee meets. Also on the 17th, the Policy Review Committee. On November the 18th, Thompson-Nicola Regional Hospital District Board meeting. On November 18th, TNRD regular board meeting. And a reminder that on November the 18th, the flu shots for staff and board members will be available here. And I think you've already been notified a dozen times to get in touch with Rosemarie to schedule an appointment. But if you haven't done so, get in touch with Rosemarie to schedule an appointment. Please find today in your blue folders one book, one community handout from the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library, and any mail that was personally addressed to you. So are there any additions to or deletions from the agenda? Director Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to rise on a point of personal privilege, if I may.
You may.
It occurs to me that Director Kershaw has dutifully led this board as vice chair for the last 3 years through some very stormy waters. And I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to get that silly cloth mask off his face and provide him with a Blazers mask, because he is the #1 fan of the Kamloops Blazers, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate all that you have done as vice chair of the board. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Does that say something?
Yes, sir. Is that everything? Is that with respect to his chin or his mouth, Director Chris? I know what it would be in my case.
I would just like to thank the board for the 3 years that I was able to put in as vice chair, and say it was challenging, but very conclusive anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Kershaw. I think that takes us to minutes. There are regular board
There we go.
minutes. Yes, that looks much better.
Is that better?
I have to say. It's
Oh.
almost as nice as the Montreal Canadian one I
Yeah,
found.
well, that will be there. Thank you.
There's a recommendation with respect to the minutes. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Unfinished business. Doesn't seem to be some. Takes us to bylaws, noxious weed control conversion and service establishment bylaw. There's 2 recommendations.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried.
The recommendation 2.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? No one's opposed. That takes us to 7.2 zoning amendment bylaw 2744 Adams Lake Forest Service Road, Adams Lake.
I'd like to move number 1.
Moved and seconded. One. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on recommendation number 2? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any?
Thank you.
That's carried. Development applications, ALC, pardon me, application for 9580 Wilson Road, Knuff Lake. There is a recommendation. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. ALC application with respect to 181 Midday Valley Road, southwest of Merritt. There's a recommendation. Moved, seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Singh.
Gil, I want to congratulate you on your reelection. Wonderful.
Thank
That's great. Just one, I keep on forgetting kind of how this works in terms of, so if we are recommending for refusal, does the ALC then, they just go with that, or do they actually have their own discretion as to what they do? This
Mrs.
changed
Okama?
right over the years,
They
Mrs.
have their
Okama?
own discretion, absolutely, yes.
but the applicant now has to come through us though, right? The applicant can't go directly.
No, they cannot. There's only a couple of items like soil removal or fill application or right-of-way where there are some minor applications that they can go directly to the ALC, but the majority of the applications go through local government.
Just out of curiosity, is there a option, which I don't recommend here, but an option is to say, we're not even putting it forward, we're just gonna basically say no?
Yes, you have that option to deny it outright now.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any further discussion with respect to the recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. ALC Land Commission application number ALR 1964507 Stony Flats Road. There is a recommendation. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And application number 193-2641 Aberdeen Road, Lower Nicola. There's a recommendation. Is there any discussion? Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Savilkova, can you give us an explanation on why the extension would be as long as 25 years? Is that normal, or why is it that period of time? Like, why wouldn't this be already in works of doing it, properly and not just having an extension?
So like most aggregate operations such as this, they're completely based on demand. And it's quite a process to get the permit. So if possible, they try to ask for more time so they don't have to come back for a renewal. But it's crystal ball gazing. They might be done ahead and reclaim it for farmland, or in 24 years, they might be back.
Director
If I
Stamer.
may, as a secondary, is that transferable if they sell the land?
Boy. Our portion of it is for the ALC, I know that, but the Ministry of, I know they changed their name, it used to be Energy Mines, but they have a new name. I don't know, but I'm so curious, I'll get back to you on that.
Is there any further discussion with respect to the recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Unopposed, that's carried. That takes us to number 9, reports. Regular, there is a CAO verbal report from Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. Good afternoon again. I just have a few updates I'd like to provide today, starting with our newly refurbished boardroom. I hope the board likes the boardroom. I know certainly our staff does, especially the convenience of being at home again. We have worked hard to get us back to the room back in a safe manner. We have 6 board members, as you know, zooming in today. And that's typical of most of our board meetings. And as you can see, it creates, in my opinion, a well-spaced room with masks, of course. We certainly have a few things yet to complete. So these include our new meeting technology that we've talked about in meetings past. So it's specifically a wireless microphone system. So all the wires that you see will be going away. This is just delayed for a few months as we wait for that equipment. You also notice on the floor, there's some cords and things that are safely taped up. Those will also be going away and be professionally installed, including the computer here to my right. It's all going to be, all the equipment's going to be mounted just outside the door, and it's going to be actually controlled by just one laptop, which will be nice. You also notice myself, Ms. Campbell, and Ms. Jeremiah sitting in the public area. This is a short-term solution, creating a safer and well-spaced environment. One thought that we're thinking about right now is that we may have staff permanently on the side that I'm sitting and have one long table there where 4 or 5 staff could sit, and public and media then could be on this side where Ms. Campbell and Ms. Jeremiah are right now. So that's one option we're considering. As far as public participation is still being encouraged via Zoom, but we continue to work with Interior Health to find a safe path forward. As you would have noticed when you came in today, you would have seen the TV just outside the door, and that's a live viewing of this meeting. So if the public would like to come, they certainly could watch that meeting from just outside the boardroom. We're also exploring the idea of plexiglass shields in this room. We're just looking through that right now to see if that's an option, to see if during the cold and flu season, if we're going to need that. My second update would be, I wanted to provide you with an update on where we're at from my communication last meeting with respect to the COVID-19 vaccination mandate. As you're aware, the TNRD is a unique organization with a large geography and many facilities to consider. With the assistance of some expert help and coordination with our union leadership, we coordinated a staff email from myself that went out last Friday, asking staff to confidentially self-declare their vaccination status by tomorrow. The follow-up so far has been great, with 105 of our 170 staff already responding by midweek. Once we have gathered this critical information, we'll finalize what our policy will look like for the TNRD, and we'll be able to formally communicate that to our administrative team. Contractors, volunteers, and volunteer firefighters will be discussed separately, but are not part of this initial staff rollout. Our goal is to have this effective date in January or February of next year. With respect to the board of directors discussion at the last meeting, we will be providing further information to the board very soon about how the board can implement a mandatory vaccination requirement for in-person meetings among its directors, if that is the wish of the board. So that will be coming shortly. Thirdly, I wanted to simply share that the BDO forensic audit continues to move forward and as expected, and our commitment to a public presentation the week of December 13th remains on track. And then finally, I would like to share some good news with the board that we have selected a new manager of communications and marketing, replacing Michelle Nordstrom that left our organization recently to take a position on at True. And our new manager of communications and marketing is Colton Davies from Radio NL. Looking forward to his contributions and leadership starting on December 1st. So please join me in welcoming him to the TNRD team. That is my update for the day. Unless there's any questions, Chair Gillis, they can be directed towards me.
Thank you. I believe Director Quinn has a question.
Thank you. On your point one, Mr. Hildebrand, you said all the wires are going to go because it's going to be wireless. Is that wireless network going to be secure if we're going to allow the people in, and how do we handle in-camera meetings if it's all wireless?
Yeah, we're working with a consultant right now to
Okay,
ensure
thank
that
you.
this is done properly.
Thank you.
Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To CEO Hildebrand, can you give us a little bit more explanation? I know it's not a board function, but can you give us an explanation of what the recommendations from your organization for your staff is in regards to mandatory vaccinations and what you have planned? Just as there's members of municipalities here within the region that are looking at following some of the different levels of government for guidance, can you explain what you're planning on doing?
Yeah, through Chair Gillis to Director Stamer, we have actually reached out to many of the CAOs, including the City of Kamloops, as I've gone through this situation, and reached out to a lot of the CAOs in the regional district, have also reached out to other regional districts themselves to get feedback and information. The feedback we've gotten from some of the folks that we deal with is that it was very prudent to find out the status of our vaccination rate within the organization, to help mold what our policy might look like and to make sure that we're not missing anything. Working with our union leadership was important as well. And once we pull that information together, we will be able to hopefully create a policy that makes sense for our organization. That's about all I have at the moment, though, until we kind of have that data pulled together. You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Hildebrand? Seeing none, thank you for that report, Mr. Hildebrand. I'd simply like to add that I had Katie attend to a minor matter for me this morning. And she mentioned how I apologized because it was meeting day and I know how busy she is on meeting day. And she said, oh, It's nothing like it was before. It's just ever so much easier now that we're meeting in our own building. So I think it's going to be much easier on staff too, which is good. That takes us to the Crown Land Referral for Solar Energy Investigative License. There is a recommendation. Is there any discussion? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Oh, there is discussion. I'm sorry, Director Watt. I thought you were voicing your favor there.
And no, I'd just like to point out that this is the second such a motion that came to our board in the last little while. And it's obvious that 70 Mile House is a little ray of sunshine.
Well, and hoping to take advantage of the ray of sunshine, and from what I can gather here, from what little I know about solar energy, yeah. So is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Zoning bylaw response to January 2022 ALR residential flexibility changes. There is a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. This is like, I'm confused, to be honest here, about what actually this is supposed to be doing. So could you just give me, sort of like layperson's version of what this is all about?
First, absolutely, we are confused as well. Our AAC is confused, and there's been quite a few stories in the media that are that are exaggerating. I think in the last, at least the last decade, this is the most significant change to the ALC rules for housing. And they are generally being far more open, but focusing on restricting the size of the dwellings. And if you recall one of your ALC reports earlier this meeting, the rancher wishes to sever a very, very large house, very valuable house with like an indoor swimming pool, etc., from the parcel because he can't afford the land. And he wants the land for grazing and crops. So he wants to subdivide the large house off to make his money back so he can farm the land. So it's these, and that doesn't happen so much in the TNRD. That's really a lower mainland, Vancouver Island, Okanagan scenario. But since they got rid of the zone 1 and zone 2 areas, when they make changes, it applies across the province. So what, at this point, I feel like we just need to be able to tell the folks that call, we have a bylaw to our zone, a bylaw change to our zoning coming, and to affect these in the TNRD, it would require a zoning bylaw change. What we'd like to do is planning would like to come to your December 16th committee of the whole and explain and look at what we suggest and what the our Agriculture Advisory Commission suggests to beam into our zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Director Brown?
I'm not sure if this is relevant for this discussion or not, but it seems like every municipality in the province is going into a higher density for each of the lots because we're short of housing in this province. And yet 20 acres with one home only and that's it just seems to be rather restrictive. What are we doing? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know where else to take that, but that's just my position.
Director Singh? All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Adilka, but did you want to respond to that question?
So I agreed, but the changes, again, because they're based on parcel area and on dwelling area, both the primary dwelling and the accessory. So in some ways it's opening up to be far more permissive, but in other ways, so for example, on the lots less than 40 hectares, which is a lot bigger than 20 acres, right? It's 60 acres about, is that right? Yeah. Okay, thanks. So on smaller lots, there would be an automatic ability to build, stick build, a second dwelling if it's the board's desire. And it doesn't have, previously it had to be a manufactured home. However, the kicker is the size is capped at 90 square meters, which is about 960 square feet, which is smaller than a lot of the large single wide, never mind the double wides that we have now. So it's complicated. It's a bit of everything.
Thank you. Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. Just Director Brown's point, I think that there's two things that kind of weigh here. One is the notion of like basically peripheral urban sprawl on the sort of boundaries of more dense areas, which is a problem, I think, generally speaking, in planning principles. But the second thing is that I had occasion once to hear a former chair of the Land Commission speak, and he was talking about at that point, and it's still the same thing, the issues around food security, actually having not only extreme weather causing problems getting food from California potentially to BC, but also secondly the competition we actually have from places like India and Brazil or whatever that are actually with food causing more cost to happen in our grocery stores. So if we have and the LLC says essentially that only land that's, so you can't have these smaller parcels, are harder to farm. So I mean, that's why I've always kind of gone here at the board, is that we need to make sure that our parcels are enough size so that actually viable. We don't know how hard farming is anyways, but to have a viable, what the province sort of says is viable is a certain level. And so these subdivisions do certainly strike at the heart of that, in my view, and are problematic.
Director Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think Director Brown hit it right on the head. People with 28 hectares or above have got a lot of land that cannot be farmed because of lack of water, soil. Like my land is sitting on a gravel pit. And this regional district has not looked at that because of the ALR and because of the sprawl that was not conducive to the regional district's planning. However, those lots are sitting there with one house on them, most of them, on a 1.5 acre, probably 2 acres usable land, and the rest of it's going to sagebrush or just to rack and ruin. And in my view, if we're going to continue to build houses in this regional district, some of that land has to be let go so that they can build on it, because you're getting a lot of these parcels of land that are of no value and you can't do anything with them. And there's lots of ways in the modern generation that you can build cisterns or whatever to get water to them, especially just for 1 or 2 houses. So I'd like to see that our planning department take a look at all of those issues.
Director Brown.
I guess in terms of the whole food security, I've heard farmers say to me, they can't do a good enough job because they can't get employees. They can't have places for them to live when they're out away from central municipalities. So it works both ways with food security. They need the staff and they need housing for staff as well, in terms of families that come along with the employee. So subdivision is a different story than food security and being able to have staff that help you look after your farm.
So I would ask that directors, when they're speaking, remove their mask because it's difficult enough as it is. Most of us up here at the front are not able to discern more than half of what you're saying. So I'm hoping that by the next meeting, there'll be something done with the system here. But in the meantime, please remove your masks when you're speaking. Director Watson.
I'm wondering if, don't you have to prove water before you can before you can subdivide a piece of property? And so these places that have 20 acres with no water on them, you couldn't subdivide to these smaller lots with no water on them, could you?
You would have to prove water, correct?
Mhm.
For really large agricultural parcels or the really rural ones, then over a certain parcel size, you don't under our subdivision servicing bylaw. However, there are a lot of historical subdivisions that have no water that we've inherited, so we don't, they use cisterns or what have you, but for new subdivisions, yes.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. So the idea of taking a 20-acre parcel with no water and subdividing it so that more people don't have water wouldn't float.
Is there Director Elliott?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I can't let that go. You can divide land and put water on that land, even if it doesn't come out from underneath, by varying ways within the technology that we have today. And you don't need to prove water out of the ground to have a house with water. You can have it shipped in, you can put all kinds of other availability. And I can tell you categorically that if you're pumping for 400 feet and you are trying to get water to one house, it's a lot more expensive than having it shipped from Kamloops. And I think that it's a poor, it's a poor, that what Sally just said is just not right. We should be able to subdivide because there are ways to do that.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed today? No. Sorry? Director Watson, are you opposed? Okay. That takes us to committees, internal committees, audit committee, Director Rain.
Yep, no meeting, no report. However, I think the audit committee would like to meet with the Director of Finance and talk about our next audit meeting and an agenda.
Thank you. Economic Development, Director Roden.
No meeting, no report.
Electoral Area Directors Meeting, Director Kershaw.
I'd like to move the minutes of the 23rd, September the 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Someone's opposed. That's carried. Emergency Management and Protective Services Committee, Director Watson.
Yes, I don't see any minutes here. We did have a very interesting meeting with Wildfire BC and Kamloops Fire Center. And out of that came a wish to have another meeting with them with better answers and better questions. And then there came recognition that there was a meeting between the chair, Director Stamer, and Wildfire BC. And I would like to ask the board to ask if I could possibly be in on that meeting as chair of the Emergency Management Committee.
Director Stamer.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I have no objection.
Thank you. Is there any Is that a motion, Director Watson? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? In favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Thank you.
Policy Review Committee, Director Sinclair.
No meeting, no report.
Regional Solid Waste Management, Director Schaefer.
No meeting, minutes are still forthcoming.
Thank you. Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management, Director Kershaw.
No meeting, next next month.
Yeah, this month, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, 17th. Yeah.
17th.
Thompson-Nicola Regional Hospital District Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned in the opening announcements, the next meeting will be November the 18th, and look forward to us as well as our colleagues that join us for that meeting. I did want to say that the CAO, Hildebrand, and myself were invited yesterday to an event put on by the Royal Inland Hospital Foundation, in which they announced a $15 million donation from the Phil and Jenny Gallardi Foundation towards the new tower, and that tower will be called the Phil and Jeannie Gallardi Tower now. Also, while we were there, we had an opportunity to go on a closed or private tour of the construction to date, and I certainly was impressed, particularly with the new OR suites that are in there, and there are 11 of them. And the mental health and substance abuse area, fully 2 floors dedicated to that, and the obstetrics and the NICU, which will really deal with all of the obstetrical issues for the entire region, very sophisticated and state of the art. That facility is on schedule to open in July.
Thank you so much, Director Quiston. That was quite a shot in the arm for the foundation, wasn't it? Utility System Committee Director Elliott.
Mr. Chairman, we had a meeting, but I don't see any minutes, so right now we'll wait for the next meeting.
Thank you. Thompson Headwater Services Committee Director Quinn. Thank you. Wells Gray Country Services Committee Director Schaefer.
No meeting. There will be a meeting later in November.
Thank you. Joint Services Committee Director Schaefer.
Meeting November the 8th.
There's minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting October 22nd. Is there any discussion? Director Watson?
Yes, I do have some concerns about an item on here. Is it appropriate to bring it up now, or should I Regina Sadokova has left the room, so that's too bad. The concept of us creating yet another bylaw, when we have bylaws that are not being, bylaw infractions that are not being addressed, concerns me. I don't think that we should be making laws that we can't enforce. And it does concern me greatly that there is a bylaw infraction on Loon Lake Road that has been put to the side because the bylaw officer and that area of the TNRD is very busy. And so why would we create another bylaw?
Well, I think that might be a valid concern, and I'm not exactly sure where it should be brought up, but I don't think it's affected, that it affects the minutes, does it, Ms. Campbell?
play a bit of musical chairs here. No, I don't think so, Director Watson. You're just referring, are you referring to the discussion at committee of the whole regarding the CCAMs? Is that? Yeah, so I believe Ms. Adilkova is going to be bringing back a proposed bylaw or a more fulsome report on that issue. So I think that would be the appropriate time to talk about it.
Thank you. I just didn't want this to go choom and have no effect on it. Thanks.
Thanks. Is there any further discussion with respect to the minutes themselves? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. That takes us to external committees, the Fraser Basin Council, Director Rice.
Next meeting, Tuesday, November 9th. Thank you.
Can you repeat that a little louder, Director Rice, please?
Certainly, we have a meeting Tuesday, November 9th, this coming Tuesday.
Thank you. MFA Director Brown.
No meeting, no report.
To Municipal Insurance, Director Duty.
No meeting, no report.
Thank you. Shuswap Watershed Council, Director Crow.
No meeting, no report.
And Kamloops Airport Authority Society, Director Kershaw.
Now, our next meeting is on December the 2nd, and maybe so staff can make sure that Vice Chair Director Roden receives the information for that meeting.
That's, I'm getting a nod from Ms. Campbell. So Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Director Singh.
No report, Mr. Chair. No report.
Thank you. Community Energy, Director Blackwell.
No meeting, no report.
Okay, correspondence, we have action requested, letter from Tricia Thorpe and request for a public meeting for wildfire impacted residents in the Lytton area and other concerns. The issue of the meeting, as I understand, Mr. Hildebrand, has been addressed. It's set for November the 8th, is it not? Okay. There were some other concerns and I think probably Director Rice is wanting to respond to those. Is that correct, Director Rice?
Yes, thank you, Chair, if you don't mind. And I've spent the last couple of weeks sort of reflecting on a lot of things. And can you guys hear me okay? I was up to about 8 pages of things I reflected upon, and I've got it down to like 1. So heaven forbid for that. Anyways, it's been a tough time in my life, and as you all know, and difficult times, but you know, you always want to make the right choices, and sometimes you don't. And certainly I've made a couple that I would take back. So I had to write it down because I'm pretty emotional about this. So I'm just going to read what I wrote and sort of leave it back and then turn it back to the chair at that point, because sometimes I get a little carried away. And I just want to put everything in context in my life, because it really plays a role in this. And so I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to address the real concern I have and how I felt, you know, I needed to do better. Let's put it that way. We were notified on June 25th, my brother's birthday, that our daughter was gone. We immediately jumped in the car and drove to Lake Country to be with our 2 grandkids, Sod and Ahad, and their dad, so we could tell the kids together that their mom wouldn't be coming home, because Rehan needed that support, and we didn't hesitate. The rest of our family began to arrive in Lake Country. We put together a plan to go to Kamloops and gather the other 7 grandkids and our other 4 children, and we all came to the farm. After the kids arrived at the farm with the rest of the family coming in to support us, the extreme heat, 50-degree heat that hit Lytton also hit Spence's Bridge. It was even a little hotter here. And three days after that, of course, 3 hot days, Lytton burnt to the ground. My family had to evacuate shortly thereafter. And then the wildfire team came to the packing house and asked if we could serve them breakfast, sack, lunch, and dinner. We did. We just had our celebration of life for Andrea 2.5 weeks ago. My mom, my hero, passed away on September 9th. Her service is not yet set. I am not okay, but I am trying. And so This has been an extremely difficult time for many. However, there can be no way to comprehend the emotion that one must feel when they have the community they call home burned to the ground in 15 minutes. After 3 days of scorching, record-breaking heat, the Lytton folk fled for their lives, turning only to see their houses, their businesses, their town up in flames. Where do you go? Where are your other family members, your friends? How about your pets and farm animals? So many questions, no answers. This has never happened in our lifetimes, and hopefully will never happen again. How do you process all this? How do you find your family? How do you go through these times, these unprecedented times, when some of you are alone? I don't know. Disbelief, extreme sadness, anger, hopelessness, a bucket of emotions, and not knowing what, where, how, or even why this is all happening to you. No one could ever imagine being in those shoes unless you actually wore those shoes. I've taken an oath of office that I take very seriously every day I wake. That is what I am sworn to do. There is little doubt that I've made mistakes since first being elected in 2011. That said, I've always owned up to my mistakes and when needed, apologize. That is why saying that Trish and Don's place did not burn down at a recent board meeting and not knowing as to the status of the homes in the Botany Valley was so wrong. At a very hurtful time for all the Lytton family, I needed to get it right and I didn't. For that, I am truly sorry. I have learned from it as I try to learn from all my mistakes. I will undoubtedly make mistakes moving forward, but I welcome anyone to please let me know as Tricia did. Anyone that knows me knows that the hardest thing for me is in being a politician or a father is that I just want everybody around me to be happy. That is my peaceful place. As a father, this simply doesn't happen very often. As a politician, it just ain't gonna happen at all. So I resign myself to pleasing the most people that I possibly can at any given time, should it be the right thing to do. I will take this lesson to heart. With the new world of social media, it has never been so important to get the facts, to get it right. One hurtful post can open a social media Pandora's box of hurtful comments. Getting it right has never in our history been so important. I need to do better and I will. Tricia Dawn, I'm truly sorry for your loss and to all the loss of all the people who were impacted as a result of this horrific wildfire season. I yield back to the chair.
Thanks for that impassioned comment, Director Rice. I can tell you that you're not the only one who made slips in that regard during the course of the summer. That brings us to 11.2 information only. We have a correspondence from the Forest Enhancement Society of BC. Could be received for information, I hope. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. That brings us to new business from members. Director Schaefer, Director Rain. Director Schaefer, go ahead. Oh. I'm sorry, Director Rain, were you ahead there?
Yeah, I think he was.
No, sorry, I just wanted to go back on the letter from Ms. Thorpe. She's requesting a meeting. Is that happening? Is that not happening? Or?
I understand. Mr. Hildebrand, maybe you'd respond to that. I thought we dealt with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As per her request, she was asking for a community meeting, and that is in fact on November 8th coming up, where the Village of Lytton is having a meeting, as well as the folks that are around the surrounding area of Lytton.
Okay, Director Schaefer.
Two things. I would like to ask the electoral area directors when they would like to have their meeting with IHA. And most of us have come up with November the 9th at 2 o'clock, and I'd like to know if everybody's in favor of that, if they're available. I'd like to know for Steve for sure. Rice.
You are,
Hold on.
is everybody else available on November the 9th? So if we can all write back to that email that was sent to us saying we are available on that date, that would be great, and at that time.
Look at it.
Okay,
Is there a time? I'm sorry to miss the time.
at
Director.
2 o'clock,
Pardon?
2 o'clock in the afternoon.
2 o'clock.
It can be done by Zoom or by telephone.
Okay, Director Quinn, are you okay with that, or did you have a question? Pass? Thank you.
My second issue is, this morning I was involved with a death, and we have our Blackpool Fire Hall in Baden, we have first responders. They're very qualified to do the job. But when the neighbor phoned, he was on the phone for half an hour before he got through to 911. And then they put him through, after they talked, they put him through to the ambulance. And it took the ambulance another 20 minutes to get there. If the TNRD could authorize that first responders become part of the fire department, we're not urban where we can have separate things. We're rural. We need to have one-stop shopping. So I would like to get the TNRD to look at that and make first responders part of the fire department, because if the first responders could have been there this morning, it would have been 5 minutes, and it could have meant that her life was saved. So do I have to put that in a motion that I would like the TNRD to review? I'll second it.
So if I understood you right, you're asking for a motion that staff investigate the possibility of integrating first responders together with fire departments in, did I get that right?
Yes, I'm also looking at highway rescue, but that's a different issue. This one, I'd like to get on it right away, because we've had one death now that I know of in my town.
Right.
Don't need any more, when first responders can be there in 5 minutes and maybe save your life.
Okay, I happen to know that there's going to be some very difficult wrinkles to take out of that one, but yes, we can certainly entertain that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Director Kershaw.
Yes, I agree with the chair that I think it's a good way of going about it, but I know there's going to be kickbacks, because through myself and Mr. Gill, once we tried that in Barrier before and got very sad repercussions. So we'll see how you make out.
Pass. Doesn't matter how much you like the Blazers, Director
Yeah.
Kershaw.
I thought they put some common sense in that. But anyway, I say in Barrier, we tried that once before to try to put it through, and they rejected it back there. The first responders in Barrier at that time had nothing to do with it being through the fire department, because they wanted to have their own self-control. So we'll see what happens. Director Stamer might have something to say on that.
Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sympathize with Director Schaefer. It's coming to roost in some of the shortfalls of the BC ambulance service, in as much as that, you know, with our situation in Barrier, the first responders want to be their own set society, and that's fine and dandy. And in most cases, those responders are qualified paramedics that are working part-time to pick up the shortfalls that the BC ambulance service, for whatever reason, can't pick it up, whether the ambulance is somewhere else. But I really think that we should be pushing the BC ambulance service harder on this topic as well, because it's too bad that it took 30 minutes for that call to go through and then another 20 minutes to respond. But also part of that whole issue is the fact that if the first responders are the first ones to respond to that incident, they are not allowed to transport. And that's something that's bugged me for a long period of time, because if you have an industrial accident, you're able to put that injured person into an ATV or an MTC, and you start heading towards, qualified care. You've already contacted the BC ambulance service. You meet them wherever you can, and then they take the handover. To have the first responders sitting there waiting for the BC ambulance service to arrive so they can actually transport that patient is ridiculous. And I think we need to be able to get back to BC ambulance service and get them to understand where we're coming from in the rural areas. Particularly if you've only got one ambulance servicing that area, that ambulance could be in Kamloops and all of a sudden there's another incident, as Director Schaefer mentioned, and we don't have the capacity. Even if that first responder could have got to that residence in Blackpool, they are not allowed to transport that person to the emergency room in Clearwater 5 minutes away. That's ridiculous. So that's something that we should be working towards, because I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all to me.
So Director Samer, is it possible that if we do go ahead with this motion, that that would be one of the recommendations coming out of staff's investigation into the question?
I would think so, Mr. Chair. And also at the same time, you know, Director Schaefer probably has more information to that effect, but you know, with the way we have it in Barrier is the first responders, the vehicle is housed inside the fire department, but they are a separate entity to themselves. And they do get responded out by 911, similar to what Director Schaefer has said. And in a lot of cases, they do attend before the ambulance service does. But again, when they start working on that patient, if they require additional care, they cannot move that patient until the BC ambulance service shows up, which doesn't make any sense at all.
I understand. Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Part of this, with an aside, is that it wasn't that long ago when the BC ambulance was in here telling us about this new process they've got and how wonderful it would be and how much better service we're going to get. Blue River now has only a 3-day ambulance. Community paramedic no longer is in existence. And a lot of the time when that ambulance is manned, it is elsewhere. I don't know that if we have first responders, in part because it's a small community and not many people, but this whole thing of emergency response in rural areas needs to be looked at. We were promised that by the province, I think before I even got back here, and we're still waiting. And highway rescue and all those services all are run in rural areas, and they're not the same as they are in, with all due respect to Ken Christian the mayor, they're not the same as Kamloops, they're not the same as the Lower Mainland. And the government is letting us down. They're not servicing the people that they're supposed to represent well. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion that staff investigate the Director Schaefer, are you?
I just want to say that I'm talking about rural areas, and our first responders at Blackpool and Baby, this happened in Baby, are within 5 minutes of that area. But they're all trained. All the firemen are trained as first responders, and I think we have to expand rural area fire departments and make it a one-stop shop. Because we're not municipality, we're not Vancouver, where you have all these separate entities. We have certain people doing certain things, and if the first responders can get there, I know they can't transfer them, but they can maybe keep somebody alive. Where if we're waiting for the ambulance, like this morning, the ambulance people, when they got there, said they were the only ambulance, and we've got 3 ambulances in Clearwater. And by that time, she was gone.
Thank you, Director Rain.
Yeah, this is not only in rural areas. Sun Peak's the same situation exists. We have no ambulance service. We have first responders who are trained to that same level. And they are there with a patient for an hour when people will tell you the golden hour is the hour that, in the first hour, they need to get them to a proper hospital. And certainly our community has approached that subject several times, saying if need be, we'd be happy to have an ambulance, first to transfer people from locations within Sun Peaks to our health center. And secondly, if it's a critical case, transfer those people immediately to Royal Inland. And said, no, you can't transfer people. I mean, you have somebody who's critically injured and you can't transfer them. At the same time, on a construction site, and don't ask me how many people, but with 6 or 7 workers on a construction site, they already know that we're too far away from Royal Inland for safe medical care. They must have an ambulance on site. So for a half a dozen people, you must have an ambulance on site, so you can transfer them immediately to Royal Inland. And yet for the masses, for the 1,100 residents, you have no ability to transfer them. And I agree with Director Stamer, this makes no sense whatsoever.
Thanks, Director Rain. Good, okay, we have that motion before us that staff be asked to investigate the possibility of integration between BC Ambulance and first responders. I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. But is there any other new business from members? Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under new business, while we're stirring things up a little bit, I don't know if anybody was on the highway between Kamloops and Merritt on Tuesday morning like I was. I believe you were as well. And quite frankly, I found the maintenance standards to be pretty much non-existent. There was approximately 5 semi-accidents between Merritt and Kamloops. So that's about 1 every 10 miles. I would like an explanation from MOTI on exactly what their maintenance standards are. And again, what are the penalties if those maintenance standards are not being met? And after talking to Director Brown off camera, she was mentioning that some of these contracts they have are 15 years in length. Well, quite frankly, I don't care, because that's a cop-out. You know, it must have been incredibly slippery when you've got transport trucks trying to come off the Savanaugh connector and they slide backwards and go over the bank and down into the hole. I see even on the Peterson Creek portion where there was a bunch of activities. And let's face it, it wasn't a 1 in 100 year weather event Tuesday morning. So if that means that we have to look at a variant, what is it, a speed variant corridor similar to what they have in the other parts of the Coquihalla, where possibly we may have to change the maximum speed limit between Kamloops and Merritt because of road conditions, fair enough. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, those road conditions were totally unacceptable. And I think I've got enough experience to be able to have that as an opinion. So I'd like to be able to have an opportunity to talk to MOTI at our next available opportunity and tell them that we want to have a copy of the maintenance standards. And if they don't give it to us, we'll do the freedom of information and find out, because quite frankly, there was nothing there.
Mr. Hildebrand, is there any reason that we cannot have MOTI come and speak to us at the first available opportunity?
We can certainly plan for that.
I would appreciate that, because I was on the road the same day as Director Stamer. It was unbelievable. And there was a complete absence of any sign of maintenance. And if they had scattered a bit of salt, they certainly hadn't put down any grit. And the accident to which he referred, I saw it, I didn't see it happen, but I saw where someone had pulled off the Trans-Canada Highway heading for Highway 5 towards Merritt. And it was so slippery that the tractor trailer spun out, slid backwards, went through the no-post guardrail and over the bank. So it was unbelievably icy. And I would add to that, that I just went for a haircut this morning, and my barber that same day went to Vernon and said she saw innumerable. She didn't tell me how many, but she made it sound as if every 500 feet there was a car in the ditch. So we have to do something to find out what's going on. I agree. Was there anyone else that wished to speak? Director Rice?
Let me unmute here. Yeah, I just had one piece of new business I'd like to bring up. Can you hear me okay? Hello? Yep. Okay. A phone man was in my pedestal in front of my house yesterday and trying to scrounge a pair of copper wires for a customer down the road who's been out for 5 months. And it sort of stirred my little memory a little bit, because I had sort of talked to Melanie from TELUS about this a few months ago during the wildfire season. And so the Lincoln Creek fire brought many of these issues to the forefront. One of the issues was the safety of the folks who live on Highway 8. You lose cell coverage about 7 kilometers outside of Spence's Bridge on the way to Merritt. This means that all the folks, mostly elders, are dependent on landlines. Unfortunately, as the wildfire highlighted, when these landlines are down, all the people on highway are without any communications. The copper lines have degraded to the point where there's not nearly enough to serve the corridor community along Highway 8. And recently, during the wildfire, we had 2 medical emergencies after the Lytton wildfire. In both cases, the only option was to jump into a vehicle and take off to emergency. That said, it was fortunate there was someone home to do that. Some of these folks live alone, or their housemate may not even be home. The safety concern of our citizens needs to be the highest priority. TELUS has been working on this to fix these lines for, well, over 4 months. And to their credit, they keep coming out and trying. Being a former phone man myself, who was a repairman for the phone company for 16 years, I know what they have to do, and I know the copper is no good. And the splicers have done their best, but it's simply not there. So there's quite a few folks right now with absolutely no communications. And by no communication, I mean no landline, no cell service, no internet at past the 6 kilometer mark here on Highway 8. Next time there's a medical emergency, we could lose someone, because if someone's home alone and they have no way to communicate and they can't jump in the car because they've had a stroke or something, we probably will lose them. So I would like to ask that we request TELUS. I've talked to Melanie about this, and she gave me a thumbs up to at least make the request. And so I would like to put this forward, a motion forward. And whereas TELUS already has a fiber optic network running along Highway 8, and whereas TELUS has temporarily laid 12.5 kilometers of fiber optic cable on the ground after it was disintegrated by the Lytton wildfire, and will need to make it permanent at some point. And whereas the wildfires have become the norm, not the exception for the BC interior, and whereas a heart attack, stroke, or accident could happen at any time, and this complete void of communication is a critical piece of the emergency response. Therefore, I'd like to ask that TELUS look to activate the existing infrastructure to activate cell service along Highway before the next wildfire season, or sooner if possible.
It's seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Director Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask Director CAO Hildebrand a question. Some time ago, and I think it must have been before COVID, we had looked at this boardroom. We had also talked about energy savings. One of them was solar panels on this roof. Was it ever looked at in any way?
Through you, Chair Gillis, to Director Elliott, it certainly was looked at, and I'm not sure the status of where it's at, but I believe there was a grant that we looked into. I don't believe we were successful in that one, but it's still in our strategy to potentially do that with solar power.
Right, because I'm sure it works in with the next question we're going to deal with, but it's something that I think should be done. We should be leading the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had just a little bit of new business where I did respond to the request from the city of Vernon, and I attended their appreciation luncheon for the ESS volunteers. They were enormously grateful for the contribution that TNRD made. And other than that, it was pretty much a routine luncheon, and people got up and received their awards and so on and so forth. But the TNRD did certainly receive recognition for its contribution. That would seem to be it for new business. That takes us to a notice of it. Sorry, Director Schaefer.
I'd just like to know if we can improve the sound system here, please.
We will certainly look into that.
I can assure you that Mr. Hildebrand and the IT people and I will be going into that in some detail immediately following this meeting, because if you think it's bad from your perspective, it's dreadful from ours up here. I haven't asked Director Roden, but certainly the three of us can't hear a thing. So we're sort of just flying by the seats of our pants. It's dreadful. It's beyond dreadful. Okay, notice of motion. There is a notice of motion. Did you wish? I'm sorry?
No,
Director Rice, did you have more?
Yeah, real quick, Chair, thank you. I just, please let I just want to thank everybody that's reached out to me. It's part of healing and it really has helped. So I just want to say thank you. And there's a lot of you guys have reached out to me and guys and gals, and thank you so much. I really feel that that is something that every time I get one, I feel better. Let's put it that way. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Director Rice. Now can I get to the notice of motion? We have a notice of motion. Therefore, be it resolved that the chair establish a standing committee. This is a matter of chair discretion. So did you wish to speak to that initially, Ms. Campbell, or did you wish to have Director Singh speak to it initially? It doesn't matter to me.
I'll let Director Singh speak to it. We've talked about this.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I'll try and speak slowly. Not really my strong point, but given the sound system, I'll try my best. So first of all, I just want to say there's no finer director on this board than Director Rice, and I just want to say I feel really thankful for his comments today and want to send my heart out to him. What Ms. Campbell informed me of was that a select committee would be more in order what I was looking for, because that's a board form committee as opposed to one that's, and I like our chair, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important to have the board. So the motion is the same, except that it would say that the board establish a select committee on climate action to provide advice to the board of directors and recommend policies and plans that will assist the TNRD take necessary steps to adapt, to mitigate, and reduce climate change impacts. That's the motion. And if we get a seconder that I can talk to it.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Sure, if I may.
Director Singh and then Director Quinn.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. So in the whereas that staff have provided here, and I think it is okay. So there is a direct link now established between increase in greenhouse gas emissions and the extreme weather we've been facing all across the world, but obviously we saw particularly in our regional district over the last few years, and especially this past year. I'm going to take a very positive side to it, because I think that there's lots of opportunities here for the region. I sort of started first thinking about it when I was on the UBCM Climate Action Committee, and thinking about, for example, forestry and value-added wood and economic development through that actually can be very enabled by a climate action lens. Actually, I'll point to Merritt, because I just heard obviously the Merritt First Nation is doing the carbon capture plant, but when we did the board tour a number of years ago, we went to the pellet plant that was enabled by the carbon tax that was there. And I think that it's obviously in every local government's jurisdiction to do their own thing, but to collaborate as a region, I think is really, really a critically important piece. And one of the things that we talked about also with when we talked about biosolids around this board table was energy generation through that. So what I'm proposing here is a committee that would actually not just be people talking off the cuff at board table, but basically being able to strategically look at what our emissions inventory is, what the opportunities and challenges lie. So I did look at our regional growth strategy, for example, what we have right now talks about transportation as being a key aspect and reducing greenhouse gas emissions through that. Our strategic plan that we just developed, Mr. Hildebrand, talks about engagement and corporate emissions. Now, I'll talk about the city of Kamloops for just 1 second, because we've had a committee at the city talking about climate action for several years, and it works really well because we have electeds, staff, and the public. So it really has that holy trinity of people who work together to really put forward this thing in a really, really strong way. The last thing I'll say is that we all have our various connections Director Rice on the Fraser Basin Council, Director Blackwell on the Community Energy Association, myself on the BC Climate Leadership Council municipally, and also on the FCM board, and many others of us who have connections and opportunities. And I think that less urban regions across the province, I'm talking outside Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, don't necessarily get the amount of programming and support from other orders of government that we actually could get, because we're not organized with our policy around greenhouse gas emissions. So that's in essence what I'm suggesting. Obviously, the board will decide to appoint who it appoints to that committee. But I think it's a massive opportunity for us to actually really get this process, these policies in a very good place, and really reflect what our citizens will be looking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Singh. Director Quinn.
I think Director Riley had his hand up first. Okay. I don't want to sabotage anybody. I'm going to make a motion to table this until our committee of the whole week on December 17th. And I can give you two reasons for that. One is that I certainly appreciate that, and I can see a lot of benefit in this, but I got this email from Director Singh this morning at 6 o'clock, and I haven't really had time to think about it. Frankly, that's my personal thing. In addition, it talks about electrification. Today, there's a meeting with BC Hydro. It's a conference call on electrification, and I would like to have been able to attend that before addressing that. I have requested a transcript of that meeting, and we'll wait for it. I don't see any, it's broad-based, and it's certainly admirable, but I see no notification of what the costs might be, or what staff time might be. And so I think that it would be a good idea to have a wholesome discussion on the committee of the whole on, I think it's December 17th. And that's why I would like to table, I think is the term I like to use. Is that correct, Ms. Campbell? I think there was a second there. Second. No, I think. Oh.
So moved and seconded that it be tabled.
Yes.
Does tabling allow for discussion, or is it then just a vote?
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman, there's no discussion on table.
That's what I'm asking about.
So Ms. Campbell, where does that take it to? It's one thing to have it tabled, it's another thing to have it deferred until the following meeting. And I'm wondering if it would not be more appropriate for deferral as opposed to tabling.
Chair Gillis, I believe the motion was to table it until the committee of the whole meeting. Is that what
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You're requesting, Director Quinn, that it be tabled to the committee of the whole meeting? Is that correct?
Ms. Campbell, I don't know if you can lean toward that thing or what, but we can't hear a word you're saying.
I'm gonna yell at you guys. That's correct. When you're tabling it to another, you're gonna take it up at another meeting. We do. Correct.
Thank you. So where are we, Ms. Campbell?
Was it seconded? I didn't. Okay, so then you can vote on it now. Table.
I have no idea where we
So
are.
then now Chair Gillis will just call for a vote on Director Quinn's motion to table this until the December 17th committee of the whole.
Table. So that goes to a vote, does it not? All
Yes.
right. So then all in favor? Opposed, if any? Directors Blackwell and Singh are opposed. Director Sinclair is opposed. So it's carried. Okay, that takes us to question period. Are there any questions from the public?
Yes, Chair Gillis, there are. Just give us a moment.
Yeah.
Chair Gillis, we have Ms. Thorpe that would like to ask a question of the board. Ms. Thorpe, if you're there, if you could please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
If you could just speak up a little bit more.
Okay, I'll try. I don't speak very loud. What I requested of the board was a meeting with the TNRD and our local MLA, the same as Paxton Valley and Monty Lake had. The upcoming meeting, I believe, is being organized by the Village of Lytton. So that raises two questions in my mind. Number one, do you see the TNRD piggybacking onto whatever the provincial government is doing in terms of financial aid and debris removal for the Village of Lytton? And do residents of the Lytton area who are not Village of Lytton or First Nation have assurances that the TNRD will advocate on their behalf? And how do you see this being implemented and communicated to residents, please?
Mr. Hildebrand, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair Gillis. Can you hear me, Ms. Thorpe?
Oh, yes.
So to your question, we do have the meeting. I've talked to CAO Matuzzi in Lytton. He has said you had contacted him asking if you would be part of that Village of Lytton meeting, and he assured you that you would. TNRD will be available for that meeting and actually had the invite sent to us yesterday, which we replied to. Debris removal is going to be one of the topics on there. So we are going to be addressing that at that meeting.
And do we have your assurance that you will advocate on the behalf of those residents that are neither Village of Lytton nor Lytton First Nations?
That would be a question for the board. I certainly will, but I'd like to leave that to the board to decide. Chair Gillis, she wants to know if the board will advocate on behalf of the residents.
There is, at this end of this room, an echo that makes your comments utterly incomprehensible, Mr. Hildebrand. I'm sorry. But I'm not the only one here who can't get it. There's an echo. I don't know what's going on.
Residents of the area who are not Village of Lytton.
Will we advocate for that? Yeah. So as I understand it, Ms. Thorpe has requested that we as a board confirm that we're prepared to advocate on behalf of those people who are not part of the Village of Lytton, but who are from the surrounding area and were equally devastated by that Lytton fire. And I can't imagine there would be a problem with that. Would somebody care to make a motion that we as a board support those people? Is that Director Elliott?
Mr. Chairman, who are we supposed to be advocating to?
To the provincial authorities.
Which ones? No, I mean,
Any ones that
PFA
are involved in providing relief for these fire victims.
Oh, okay.
Moved, Director Rain. Anybody second? Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? I hope that addresses your question, Ms. Thorpe.
Thank you.
We're behind you. Go on. I think that takes us to adjournment.